Story 1 by E Jamison. Intrigued by the chilling tales, a group of paranormal investigators, including myself, decided to spend the night at the Whispering Oak to uncover the truth behind the ghostly legends. As we arrived at dusk, the motel seemed deceptively ordinary, but an aura of unease surrounded it. The air was heavy, and the atmosphere seemed to thicken with each step we took. The motel's caretaker, a reclusive man with sunken eyes, greeted us at the reception. His voice was barely a whisper as he handed us the keys and cautioned, "Stay away from room 313. It is cursed." We exchanged nervous glances but chose to ignore the warning, attributing it to the man's eccentricity. We decided to split up and explore different parts of the motel, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. As the night deepened, strange occurrences began to unfold. In room 217, I set up recording equipment hoping to capture Yvette's electronic voice phenomena. As I played back the recordings, disembodied whispers filled the air and faint cries echoed in the background. A shiver ran down my spine, but I pressed on, driven by curiosity. Meanwhile, in room 104, another investigator experienced poltergeist activity. Objects flew across the room as if controlled by unseen hands. In room 426, a cold spot appeared, followed by an apparition of a woman in a tattered wedding dress. She stood silently, her mournful eyes fixed upon us before vanishing into thin air. We decided to regroup, our nerves frayed by the encounters. However, one member was missing, our friend who had explored room 313. Panic-stricken, we rushed to the cursed room, only to find it locked from the inside. Desperate to save our friend, we forced the door open, but to our horror, the room was empty. Within room 313, an eerie silence engulfed us, and the air grew dense. The room seemed to pulsate with malevolent energy. As we searched for our missing companion, we stumbled upon an old journal filled with cryptic writings. Its pages contained accounts of tormented souls who'd once sought refuge within the room. A sudden gust of wind slammed the journal shut, and the room grew colder, freezing us in our tracks. From the darkness emerged a shadowy figure.
The specter of a young girl. Her eyes bore into our souls, her anguished wails haunting us to our core.
She reached out, as if pleading for release from her eternal suffering. Overwhelmed with fear and compassion, we recited an ancient incantation from the journal, hoping it would bring peace to the tortured soul. The room trembled, and a blinding light engulfed us. When it subsided, the girl's spirit was gone, and our missing friend reappeared, shaken but unharmed. With dawn approaching, we decided to leave the Whispering Oak, vowing never to return. As we drove away, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The mysteries of the motel remained unresolved, but we knew one thing for sure. The Whispering Oak was a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred, where the spirits of the past refused to rest, and where the truth behind the tragic fire remained shrouded in darkness. Nestled deep within the heart of a forgotten countryside stood a mysterious motel known as the Whispering Oak. It was said that the motel had a tragic history, where decades ago, a fire had claimed the lives of numerous guests. Since that fateful night, strange occurrences and ghostly apparitions plagued those who dared to venture inside its walls. Story 2 by Creed. It was a dark and stormy night when I found myself stranded on a deserted road in the middle of nowhere. My car had broken down, leaving me no choice but to seek shelter at the nearby Whispering Pines Motel. From the outside, the place looked eerie, surrounded by thick fog and illuminated only by a flickering neon sign that seemed to be whispering my name. Despite the unsettling ambiance, I was desperate for a place to stay, so I cautiously made my way to the reception. An old woman with pale, almost translucent skin greeted me with an unnerving smile. She handed me a key to room 217, whispering, "Beware the shadows, dear." Ignoring her cryptic warning, I entered the room, hoping for some respite from the storm. The moment I stepped inside, an oppressive feeling overwhelmed me. The room was dimly lit by an old-fashioned lamp, and a hauntingly beautiful painting hung on one wall. The subject of the painting was a young woman with mesmerizing eyes, but something about her seemed off. As I tried to shake off the unease, I noticed strange symbols etched into the wooden floor surrounding the bed. I couldn't decipher their meaning, but they seemed to emanate a faint glow in the darkness. Despite the oddity, I dismissed it as mere decoration and prepared to rest for the night. As I lay in bed, the storm outside intensified and the wind howled like a chorus of tormented souls. Struggling to sleep, I thought I heard whispers, voices in the wind, and faint cries that sounded like they were coming from within the walls. My heart pounded, and my mind raced with thoughts of fleeing the cursed place. Just as I was about to gather my courage and leave, A haunting melody echoed through the room. It was a hauntingly beautiful tune, but it chilled me to the core. The source of the melody seemed to be the painting on the wall. The woman's eyes glowed and her lips moved in sync with the tune, yet the painting remained still. Terrified and fascinated, I couldn't tear my eyes away. Suddenly, the woman in the painting stepped out of the frame, her ethereal figure floating towards me. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't move. She whispered sorrowful tales of her tragic past and begged for release from her eternal prison. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn into the haunting melody and the tragic story of the woman. The symbols on the floor seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and I realized they held the key to her salvation. Driven by a mix of terror and empathy, I mustered the courage to trace the symbols with my finger, not knowing what would happen next. In a flash of blinding light, the woman in the painting and the symbols vanished, leaving me in complete darkness. The room felt empty and silent once again. The storm outside had calmed, and the eerie atmosphere had lifted. Trembling, I gathered my belongings and fled the Whispering Pine Motel, vowing never to return. To this day, I can't forget the haunting melody or the tragic figure in the painting. The encounter changed me, forever reminding me of the thin line between our world and the realm of the unknown, where restless spirits and their sorrowful tales linger, seeking release from their eternal torment. Story 3 by Haunted. In the heart of a dense forest, there stood an old and abandoned motel, known by the locals as the Lost Haven. Its decaying facade was covered in ivy, and the shattered windows stared out like hollow eyes. The place had a sinister reputation, and many believed it to be cursed. Driven by curiosity, a group of thrill-seekers, including myself, decided to explore the legend of the Lost Haven. We arrived just before twilight, the sun setting behind the trees, casting an eerie glow over the motel's remains. Hesitant but excited, we pushed open the rusty doors and stepped into the darkness. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and a musty smell filled our nostrils. As we wandered through the dilapidated hallways, we noticed peculiar mirrors hanging on the walls of each room. They were antique, ornate, and seemed out of place in the rundown motel. One mirror in particular caught our attention. It was massive, stretching from floor to ceiling. Its frame was adorned with intricate carvings of demonic faces, as if warning us of its dark secrets. Unsettled, we decided to leave the room, but before we could move, the door slammed shut behind us, trapping us inside. Fear gripped our hearts as we struggled to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in, and that's when we noticed something eerie in the mirror's reflection. Our own images were distorted, contorted into nightmarish versions of ourselves. We watched in horror as the reflections moved independently, their eyes glowing with malevolence. Desperate to escape, we turned away from the mirror, only to find the other mirrors in the hallway reflecting the same grotesque images. The air grew colder, and a chilling wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing our flashlights one by one. In the pitch black darkness, we could hear whispers, taunting, sinister voices that seemed to come from all directions. The mirrors reflected figures that weren't our own, shadows lurking just beyond our vision. Terror overwhelmed us, and we huddled together, trying to find any means of escape. Suddenly, a ghastly figure emerged from the mirror closest to us. Its eyes were hollow, and its body contorted in unnatural ways. With an unnerving grin, it pointed towards the massive mirror at the end of the hallway. Its message was clear. There was no escape. We had to face whatever lay beyond that cursed mirror. Driven by desperation and a glimmer of hope, we moved towards the massive mirror. As we got closer, we saw an eerie reflection of a sinister world on the other side. It beckoned to us, promising knowledge and answers to our deepest fears. But we knew that crossing over meant accepting a dark fate. In a moment of bravery, one of our group members reached out and touched the mirror's surface. The moment their hand made contact, the mirror surface rippled like water, and they were pulled into the abyss, disappearing from our sight. Panic consumed us as we tried to pull them back, but it was futile. The mirror consumed them, leaving only a faint, distant echo of their terrified screams. With trembling hearts, we turned away, knowing that whatever lay beyond the mirror was far too dangerous to confront. In that horrifying moment, we understood that the Lost Haven was a gateway to a malevolent dimension, where trapped souls were forever tormented. Terrified and scarred by the experience, we managed to escape the motel, vowing never to speak of what happened inside. The Lost Haven would forever remain a haunting memory, a place where mirrors were portals to the darkest corners of the human soul, and where malevolent forces lingered, waiting for unsuspecting souls to stumble upon their realm of nightmares.